All right, welcome everybody to what is now the fourth episode of VALR Unfiltered, Money, Meaning and Society. And today I have the great pleasure to welcome Badi, who is the co-founder and chief product officer of VALR, of course. Welcome, Badi.
Thank you so much. Unfiltered. I'm looking forward to this unfiltered conversation.
So, Badi and I, actually, we often have interesting conversations between us. And I figured it'd be really great to, give an opportunity also to our user base and some of our listeners to just kind of tune in on what I would say is a typical Badi and Ben conversation. And also that hopefully gives a bit of insight, into kind of what's driving all the work that we're doing with VALR. So even though it is not an explicit podcast about VALR, I think it will give people a great insight. Yeah. So, Badi, maybe before we start, and for people who are not so familiar with you, maybe you can take a little bit of time just to introduce yourself, and then we'll jump right in.
Okay. Well, my name is Badi Sudhakaran. Born and brought up in India, traveled around the world, lived in 3 or 4 countries now. And first in and around Asia, then in the Middle East, and then finally in the Southern Hemisphere, in South Africa. So life has taken me to different places. And from a professional point of view, I have been in tech from my teenage years, building software, learning about software, and that is what took me to all these different places. And funnily enough, the main thing that took me down to South Africa was love. So I met my wife in Israel when I was serving as a volunteer at the Baha'i World Center. So we got married there, and then her family lives in South Africa, so we moved here together. And I think my professional and family life began in South Africa. So about 7 years ago, me and my co-founders, who we were all working together at the bank, one of the largest banks in South Africa, we ended up starting VALR to serve the people in South Africa, to give them a choice when it comes to accessing this new asset class. At the time, there was not many options. There were not many options for South African people to access crypto assets, and we felt that it was time for us to build a world-class platform. Given our expertise in the crypto field and in the tech field, in between all the skill sets that we have within the co-founding team. So we started VALR 7 years ago, and we had small ambitions at the time, but within a couple of years, we turned out to be one of the biggest exchanges in South Africa. So we're thankful for our customers and their support, because we always try to put customer at the center of everything that we do. We put service at the center of everything we do, and integrity and ethics, because we run a business that's based on ethics and service. And if there's money to be made when it requires you to bend the rules, we don't do that. So when you do that, I think the progress is slow compared to the rest of the industry, but we stick to our morals and ethics so that we are continuing to serve the people and to the best of our ability. And our aspirations are not just South Africa and Africa. We want to serve with the incredible products that we have built, customers and people around the globe. And we are trying to grow the business, not just in Africa, but the rest of the world.
It's very wonderful. Yeah, I think it's a very beautiful story. And 7 years is, of course, a long time in the crypto space. And maybe in the times of Mount Gox, I mean, that was the only way of envisioning what a crypto exchange might be. But now, kind of so many years later, you can see that there's different types of crypto exchanges, different types of crypto firms that also each type to a different that serve a different type of market participant, you could say, or a user. And hopefully, I always hope that people can see that VALR is about values and what it stands for. And of course, you want people to come to VALR for the product, but also for the principles and the trust, hopefully, that people have in VALR. Now, of course, you and I are both with VALR, so instead of making this podcast too much about VALR only, I figured today, I would really like to talk more about the industry at large and about this new asset class, as you say. And I was thinking about it this morning. We often look at crypto through certain categories, like categories of poverty and wealth, or categories of exclusion and access, or maybe inequity and fairness. And I think it's really useful if we can reflect on this together. Ultimately, I think everything we do should be tied to purpose, the ultimate purpose. And along the way, if you can share your insights from South Africa or India, for that matter, that's always very welcome. So I figured let's start with poverty and wealth, right? As an intro, you could say that there's the idea that for some people maybe that crypto is about escaping poverty, or perhaps it's about ridding the world of poverty, or in many cases and for many people, it's about becoming rich. That's just a reality that we have to deal with, I think. So just for context, as you know, and as you can, well, you can't really tell from my background, but that I'm in Vietnam right now. And in Vietnam, Buddhism is a very important religion. It's very important to this culture. Now, Buddha, of course, such a revered figure, chose a life of simplicity and detachment from wealth. And I can actually see around me that a lot of people here live simple lives, and they seem to be relatively content with little. But Vietnam, at the same time, is also growing economically. So it's one of the fastest growing economies in Asia. This is very amazing. I'm sure it'll kind of raise living standards. But with the influx of money, I also think there are many risks. For example, growing disparities, materialism, godlessness, maybe. So I'm saying all of this to kind of say that when we talk about poverty, you can't say it's all bad, and when we talk about wealth, it's like the nirvana of where we all must reach to. So I hope that crypto isn't just about becoming rich. But I was thinking maybe we can unpack this a bit more. So maybe very simple as a lead-in question. Do you see the rise and the uptake of Bitcoin and crypto as an inherently positive thing? Or do you also see perhaps certain risks, things that we need to be careful with as an industry, as a population, at the level of culture? Very curious what your thinking is there.
Yeah, let me write this so I don't.
You've muted yourself now.
Okay, I was just writing it down so I don't forget the sequence of questions here. So one of the things when you think about poverty and wealth is it's all relative, right? So any person in the world can claim to be poor, and at the same time he can claim to be rich. So going to your example of Buddha, you can say that he was poor because he left all his wealth. He was a king or a prince, and he left all his wealth to lead a life of asceticism. To the outward eye, maybe he was poor, but for him, he was very rich because his focus was not material wealth. So I think it all boils down to this concept of relativity, and in addition to that, it also goes to the concept of how do you define rich and poor, right? So you can say having health is wealth, or you can say having family and kids that love you is wealth, and then you can say having a big car and a big house and lots of material resources is wealth, right? So I think it also shows in many people, especially who are billionaires and who are super ultra wealthy, when you think about, when you listen to some of them, then they feel like there are many people who talk about not being happy with what they have, right? So because you might be ultra wealthy, but if you continue to want more, then you can be unhappy. If you're content with what you have, then you can be happy. So there is a Buddhist monk also who talked about gratitude and happiness. What comes first? It was very interesting to say, like so many people say, I'll be happy once. I'll be grateful once I'm happy. Okay. Once I have everything, and I'll be happy, and then I'll be grateful. But really, happiness comes after gratitude. So when you're grateful for what you have, what you've achieved, and what you, in terms of your health and your family and your community, then you can be the richest person in the world, right? So that's the philosophical take to poverty and wealth. And in addition to all of it, like when you look at countries where the level of standard of living is different in many parts of the world, like someone who is really wealthy in a country where there's pollution and filth and traffic jams, and even if you have like a really fast car, it's of no use. so a wealthy person in a country where the infrastructure is not great, then he's like a poor person in a more developed nation. So it's all like the concept of relativity goes beyond the concept of material wealth. So that's my view, and I think anyone can feel rich with what they have, and anyone can feel poor with what they want. So when it comes to Bitcoin, yes, Bitcoin has been a beacon of hope, especially for certain people in certain parts of the world where their governments have failed them. Their governments have not governed well enough to preserve the value of their wealth over time. So here's a global asset class that does not depend on any particular decision made by any particular government. It's apolitical. So we haven't had an asset class like this in a long time. Of course, gold is one of them, but it's physical goods. But Bitcoin being easily transferable, divisible, and accessible across the world and verifiable, it's a new asset class that humanity hasn't seen before. So will that make you like having a little bit of Bitcoin? Will that make you feel rich? Maybe some people, maybe not. But the fact of the matter is that, like, the early adopters who understood the value of Bitcoin have amassed a lot of the Bitcoins around the world that's circulating, right? So maybe the inequity is even greater in the world of crypto than in the traditional sense, because a few people control a majority of the asset. But then again, when you think about the value proposition of what Bitcoin has to offer and the adoption across the world of this new asset class, maybe even if you get access to this asset class now, in few years, in a couple of decades, you will be better off than if you don't have access to this asset class. So yeah, I think that is definitely completely focused on, are you materially wealthy or are you not? So my view is that if you don't have a little bit of Bitcoin, I think it's time to investigate what this asset class is and what it does and what it means for the world of finance, and get into it, because it's never too late.
Yeah, that's interesting. Would you say that it's interesting you use the word investigate, which also has the word invest in it, but that's a coincidence. But you could say that holding Bitcoin, it's not just buying it and then it'll just appreciate over time, with that idea of like, okay, it'll make me wealthier over time. But actually you notice that people that engage Bitcoin also start to want to learn about money, educate themselves about the financial system, maybe think more about how they spend their money. There's some, knowledge is also, a form of wealth in a sense. So I find that very interesting about Bitcoin. I'm not sure if it's the same with a random stock or, a little bit of, I don't know, some silver. I mean, maybe you educate yourself as well around these kind of commodities. But for yourself, like, have you, like, over these years, in these past 7, 8, 9 years, as you've engaged Bitcoin, the asset class, has your thinking around money evolved as kind of part of that experience?
Yeah. In fact, this morning I was reading some verses, and then one of the things that came up was the concept of knowledge. It said, knowledge is a veritable treasure for man, and a source of glory, of bounty, of joy, of exaltation, of cheer and gladness unto him. This is from the Baha'i writings. So knowledge is such a beautiful thing. In fact, I remember when I was a kid, my parents used to say, hey, look, the value of money is diminished quite significantly. We used to take a pocket full of money and bring bags full of groceries few years ago, and now we take bag full of money and then bring back pocket full of groceries. And like, oh, yeah, okay, so is that what's happening? Our value of money back in the day in Indian rupees has diminished. Okay, but why? How did that happen? I had no clue. And even my parents didn't have a clue. It was an accepted fact that your value, the money that you have, will devalue over time. That was an accepted fact. because they were able to see it. But why is that happening? Nobody knew. Only a few people probably knew, and I didn't have access to those people. And I was just a kid, and again, I got interested in the world of finance as I got into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Until that time, I was very heavily involved in gaining knowledge in tech. So you're right. I think when you start investing time in crypto and Bitcoin, then you start asking questions of why are things the way they are, and you gain knowledge, and then you put all of the happenings in the world into perspective, and what it means for your own material wealth and its preservation over time. So you're right. I do agree that once you get into the world of crypto, then there's so much to learn about money and its role in humanity's progress.
Yeah, that's cool. It's to bring it to VALR. Of course, I think most people will know that VALR is a values-driven company. And sometimes I worry, it's like, okay, it's a crypto exchange. We know that a lot of people come and all they want is to get rich quick. But when you start reflecting on it, I actually think it's a very meaningful endeavor. And even this podcast is part of, at least my thinking behind it is, we want to be a force of good in society on the financial side, but also in terms of knowledge. And this type of conversations and exposing our user base to it, and we're not the only ones. You look at Michael Saylor, you could look at him and say he's just amassing Bitcoin and building like wealth for his company, but actually he's doing an amazing job, I believe, in educating people and really getting companies, governments, everyday people to think about the nature of money and what that means for them in their own lives and business. So maybe to bring it to you, if you look at VALR as a values-driven company, how do you see it in terms of really making sure that our product is good for society and that our efforts is meaningful? At the end of our life, we don't just want to say, cool, we grew a company into a multi-billion-dollar company, but it has to stand for more than that. So I'm curious how you think about that.
Yeah. So from my point of view, like I was saying, the world of finance and money has been an obscure topic for me before I got into crypto. And it is indeed an obscure and unknown topic for many people around the world. And not only that, when you think about the financial services and the financial instruments that people have access to in the traditional sense, it's still kind of only accessible to a few. And not only is it only accessible to a few, it is also clouded in jargon and complicated terminologies, so much so that if you do have wealth and you want to invest, you don't even want to get into the weeds of it. And you just hire a financial manager to manage your finances, invest in things, and so on. And even now, like many financial institutions around the world, they offer these financial instruments only accessible to a few, and only a few people can also afford to get a financial manager to manage their finances. With crypto and with VALR, what our objective is to bring all of these financial instruments that can create economic freedom for customers in an easy to understand and easy to experience way for our customers. And through the evolution of our products over time in the last 7 years, we started as a crypto exchange where you can just buy Bitcoin with your rand, which is a South African currency. Then we added more trading pairs. Then we got into VALR Pay, where you can pay each other if you're on VALR. Then we introduced margin trading. We introduced derivatives trading, futures trading. We introduced staking, where you have assets on the platform and you can earn yield on it. Then we introduced lending, where you can, again, if you have passive assets on the platform, you can gain yield on that. And through this evolution, the intention is, again, to create a platform where anyone in the world can come in and gain access to these kinds of products that it was very difficult to access in the traditional sense, and easily understand how to use it. And in doing so, create freedom and create economic freedom without relying on external parties to make decisions for you, and getting charged 1 to 2% of your capital to be paid to these financial fund managers. So essentially, we are trying to create a platform where you have the ability to choose, learn, and invest in the right kind of financial instruments so that you can preserve your wealth over time.
It's very beautiful. It actually leads to the second theme that I want to discuss, and there might be some overlap, but we could potentially go deeper into it. So the second theme is that you could also look at crypto through the lens of exclusion and access. And so the idea is that the simple act of accumulating value, exchanging value, preserving value, you could argue that this kind of capacity is very unevenly distributed in the world. And so sometimes you hear people talk about universal basic income. Now, I don't know if that's a good idea, but universal basic access, I think, is a good idea, right? Everybody should have access to the things that you've described. So rather than asking you, what people should have access to, because you've kind of just described it, I think maybe one way to approach it is to go a little bit deeper and think like, what is really the consequence of exclusion? VALR wants to build towards a financial system that reflects the oneness of humanity. So we can relate that and say, okay, the oneness of humanity demands universal access. But maybe first we need to start from the perspective of exclusion. And, maybe you have your own stories to share, or your own anecdotes, or your own perspectives. It's more than just about choice, right? And relying on third-party experts. It's, I would assume, it's about much more than that. Maybe it's about human dignity. So I'm curious what your thinking is. Maybe first around exclusion. Then we can talk more about the ultimate goal of access. And then we'll bring it back to VALR from an aspirational point of view.
Clear. I think exclusion is everywhere. If you go to a conference, there's exclusion. There's VIP passes, and only these people are allowed here, and if you're general pass, then you're not allowed into that area. Exclusion is the way humanity creates envy, and envy kind of drives some drives some people to go after material prosperity, so that they can now be included. So, being in Africa, you can also see that there are conditions in certain countries in Africa where you are excluded from participating in global trade. Maybe because your country has been sanctioned, maybe because your government has not governed well and you have no basic income or disposable income. Maybe all the wealth that you have accumulated has disappeared overnight because of hyperinflation. Or maybe some countries want to preserve the integrity of their local currency, and create barriers to free trade, so that you're not easily able to move money in and out of the country. So when you think about all of those things, and compare that to more developed nations where you do have access to a currency that's fairly stable over a short periods of time. You have access to free trade where you can easily move money in and out of a country so that you can do your trade, imports, exports, and whatnot. So the world is not inclusive in that sense, right? So we have national exclusion, and within a country, there's also exclusion at various levels. So when you think about crypto, that kind of is a technology that democratizes the world of money and finance, where you have an asset class that you can move in minutes, no matter where the person is. Anyone can create a wallet, wherever they are in the world, and start receiving and making payments to anyone else in the world. And I don't know if that is not inclusion, what else is, right? So I think, coming from this traditional sense of nationalist exclusion and societal exclusion and financial exclusion, definitely when you think about crypto and what it can offer, it has the potential to create far more better levels of inclusion. And on terms of the universal basic income, that is also an interesting one, because let's say you have a skilled person in a certain part of the world, and equally skilled person in another part of the world. Somehow, depending on where they live, they will not be earning the same level of income, regardless of their skills, right? Things have changed a little bit with COVID, so because the digital gig economy kind of flourished quite a bit during the time of COVID, and companies were able to hire people from anywhere in the world, so long as they have the right skills. So it did create a better levels of equality when it comes to basic income, and I think it will continue to be the case in society, where as we move through all of these crises and companies realizing that they don't need to be bound by geographical limitations in terms of getting the right people with great skills to work for them, then I think it will raise the level of basic income across the globe. So I think crypto has a better prospect of creating inclusion than what the financial world so far has been able to achieve.
It's interesting. What came to mind for me is that people certainly will aspire to get access to something, but that we need a very wholesome transformation. Because let's say, as you described, people are living in a country. Within that country, they're excluded. For example, in South Africa, they're living in townships, for example, and just right across the road, they see beautiful houses with beautiful cars and seemingly happy lives. Then, of course, you want an opportunity to reach that. And perhaps your first entry into crypto might be, okay, I need access. I want to make money so that I can also, raise my standard of living. But at the same time, maybe more towards our first theme that we discussed, like, the concepts of poverty and wealth are much deeper and much more profound. And so hopefully, as people mature, their own kind of views of what they think they want to achieve also mature. And so access isn't just access to wealth in the material sense, but it's just growth. Like, people at least need to be able to grow in a very comprehensive manner, and we need to work towards a more equitable society. The goal is, like, I don't want to talk too much about Dubai, but I recently had a podcast around the UAE and Dubai, and it's quite a flashy place. And some of the more meaningful stuff that's happening isn't really what you see, because actually I think it's the king is really trying to build a harmonious society, a society that is very much based on the law, where everybody is equal before the law. And these things are beautiful, actually very positive. But the flashy side of Dubai might make you think that it's just about material wealth. And so in South Africa, every country has its own problems. It's not just about, let's say, getting people out of the townships into the suburbs. That's not just the only that's not the goal of a country, right? It's rather to become a more inclusive society and maybe harbor, right? It's to kind of harbor various lifestyles and various cultures, and people just want to live with dignity. I think that's
one of the things there is actually access to education. Like, as you rightly pointed out, there are within a country there are various levels of ranks and stations, and one of the great equalizers in the world is access to education. And like, even when I was growing up in India, I was not born into a very rich family or had access to everything that I wanted. We lived a decent life, but it was not flush. You could not, as a kid, have everything you wanted, or like 2 or 3 of the same things. So, but both my parents and my grandparents have always held this view that the only way to progress materially and create that kind of equalizing opportunity across the board is to do well in education, right? So despite being very expensive, I think my parents made sure that I went to the best schools and the best universities, and I think that is one of the things also in Africa is very much needed. When parents realize that they need to give their kids the best education and access to education, and then support them through it so that they become responsible citizens of the country and start contributing positively to the growth of the country. Then I think not only will the society benefit from them, but also they themselves will benefit from it by creating wealth. Just like what we just read, knowledge. I want to read that again. It's beautiful, right? So knowledge is a veritable treasure for man, right? So education is a way to gain knowledge, and knowledge is a treasure for man, and a source of glory, of bounty, of joy, of exaltation, of cheer and gladness unto him. And as parents, like I have kids, and I want to make sure that I provide them the right access, the right level of support, so that they can gain the knowledge that they feel they incline towards, so that they can also be positive contributors to the betterment of society.
Beautiful. Yeah, that is very beautiful. When we discuss all of this, almost, I would say nobody could deny the beauty of these ideas. And so, of course, you as a co-founder of VALR, you would very much hope to see a few billion people adopt and become part of VALR tomorrow. But the reality is, of course, much more complex. And unfortunately, beautiful ideas, you can almost, it's a bit banal, but like beautiful ideas don't sell themselves. Like apparently it takes a lot of effort to grow the exchange. VALR has been around for 7 years. These beautiful ideas and the product, we want to bring it beyond South Africa. We want to grow globally. I think maybe it's interesting from your perspective and just what your observations are. If our goal is to be globally accessible and serve as many people as we can to truly reflect the kind of oneness and diversity of humanity, what are actually the obstacles that we need to overcome? It could be as simple as just a license, but, FTX had a lot of licenses. Licenses aren't everything. So in your view, what is it? What are the obstacles that we need to overcome to get to a point of global uptake, which, as we could say, is a very good thing for the world?
I think the first thing is to be excellent in what we do. When it comes to creating the products and all the auxiliary services around the product, like whether it's APIs or the way that people access on their website or the app and things like that. So, and the documentation and the education around it, and letting people know of the communicate well, So there are obviously elements of running a business, especially crypto business. In addition to all of the things that I mentioned, when you're talking about crypto business, then how do you manage customers' funds? How do we make sure there's enough segregation and enough security and employment of the best practices in the industry to make sure that our funds are secure, which we do. So I think the main objective is to be excellent in everything that we do, and not compromise for mediocrity. Not settle for mediocrity. So be excellent in what we do. I think that's the first thing. So if you have that attitude to creating something really beautiful, really amazing, world class, and I think people will recognize that. So, and we're always striving. So because we cannot say that we are perfect, I think we stumble on some of the things that are tripping up our customers, or there's a flurry of support requests on a particular thing, and so we're always looking to make sure that we do the best in our product development and our communication and all the channels through which we deliver the products. That's the first thing. And once we have that, right, and then the next thing is to serve the customers that have been that are easiest to serve to the best of our ability. Like here in South Africa and Africa, because we are domiciled here, we want to make sure that they experience their experience is as seamless and as perfect as possible. And then I think like customers talk, right? So like there are a lot of crypto customers who are on Twitter, in the communities and in trading groups and go to conferences. And when you create that impression of excellence and service and, hey, these guys are great, then there's also that word of mouth communication that happens in the circles where our customers are engaging. And then once we have a great product and once we're serving the local customers really well, then we can look at taking that to the rest of the world, like by engaging with the regulators, engaging with customers, trying out different things in different parts of the world, so that they can also become aware of what VALR is all about and what VALR's products can do for them. So one of the things that has become challenging over the course of a couple of years is regulatory headwinds. So I think every country is looking at this new asset class, and it's becoming more and more mainstream. And regulators are trying to figure out how they can regulate this completely new asset class that has no borders, in line with what they have been doing for decades or even centuries with traditional ways of monitoring and regulating the traditional asset classes. So there have been varied responses. Like, for example, there are some countries who have banned cryptocurrency trading altogether. And some countries have created a very strict framework where you can only trade one thing, and you have to go through many more hoops than what you would usually go through for accessing traditional assets. So there's like the highly restrictive and highly banned areas of the world. And then there are more balanced approaches in the world where, this is a new asset class, so we need to figure out what makes sense for this technology to be regulated well. And I think those are the areas that are hopefully easy to penetrate, and let people in those regions know about the great products that we are building, and we would love to serve these regions. So yeah, I think that's the main thing in my mind. So create something excellent, serve people well, and then look at making sure that you are always abiding by the law and doing everything above board, and go into regions where there are no highly restrictive, unreasonable regulations that will hinder progress, both for a business like ours and for their people.
And that's interesting. We have to recognize that it is a process that might take decades to unfold, basically. We can't, even though you wish overnight, like we wish a lot of stuff overnight to happen, but that doesn't necessarily reflect, reality. Actually, for two of the upcoming podcasts that I have planned, one will be with a great friend of mine who will be able, hopefully, to provide a lot of insight into Russia and what adoption is looking like in Russia. And then I'll also have another episode with a professor who is really an expert on China. And I want to really ask him the question, like, what's the civilization that China is trying to build? Because just because countries ban something doesn't necessarily mean evil intent. It can also be concern. It can be to protect people. It can be to protect the system. But if you believe that system is good, then I think we have to assume good intentions, even if it may not always.
If you include Russia, China, and India, I think that's more than half of the world's population. Right.
Yeah. So
if the regulations are favorable, you can serve a lot of people well.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I mean, with China is very fascinating when it comes to the kind of the history. And Bitcoin mining most Bitcoin mining used to happen there. And Russia also is interesting from a sanctions perspective, and just the idea of there's a country that still wants to do global trade and, may not agree with some of the other dominant powers in the world. So it's a different conversation. But we'll get to that. India, let's see. Maybe there's somebody that I need to talk to in India. But let me come to the final theme, Badi, which is it's about inequity and fairness. But I don't want to kind of touch on the points we've already discussed. So we know, of course, that the current monetary system globally is perhaps unfair. We know perhaps that money printing is not great. 75% of the world, more than 75% of the world, lives in the emerging markets and basically relies on money that's inherently weak. Seems kind of unfair. And that's not even really acknowledging that the euro and the US dollar or the Japanese yen, they're also flawed in a sense, but maybe less flawed than a Zimbabwe dollar or, a Vietnamese dong, for example. So we know that the kind of rise of crypto and especially Bitcoin, hopefully, will enable us, and also the rise of crypto exchanges like VALR and others, will enable us as a humanity to build towards a more fair system. But what I wanted to ask you is maybe of a different nature, which is that in this world that is definitely struggling, you can see that the relationships between individuals and communities and institutions is pretty broken at the moment. The crypto space, you go on Twitter, there's a lot of distrust of government. There's a lot of conspiracy around institutions. There are a lot of abuse cases when it comes to institutions, abusing power. Farzam, the other co-founder, CEO of VALR, has often mentioned that these days you don't know what's true anymore. Whatever a politician says or the media says. I think that's a dire state of things. And we could, let's say we're optimistic. We say, okay, cool. In a better world, we must. I mean, either it's going to be anarchist, so there's no more governments because we can't trust the governments. But let's assume that we're going to grow towards an ordered world, some type of new world order. VALR is an institution. And my question to you in the context of this all is not so much the product, but rather, what do you envision VALR to be as an institution? You've mentioned some qualities that we rely on. How do you see that within the company evolve? Because I can see it, and maybe you can share it with the user base. How we relate to users, how we talk about users, or just generally how we relate to governments and other institutions as well, including banks that, crypto is so against, but that we are also happy to partner with. So I'm very interested in kind of your view, your vision of VALR as an institution 50 years from now?
It's a good question. It's interesting you brought up individuals, institutions, and community, and the interactions between them. So institutions interacting with other institutions. So let's look at that first. Right? I think we always take a very balanced approach in viewing the role of our institution, which is VALR, as well as the role of the asset class that we offer in relation to other institutions. So, which is basically the traditional institutions. So banks have been around for decades, if not centuries, and they have been serving a certain purpose when it comes to the monetary and financial system of the world. And there comes a time when there are these disruptors, right? The disruptors in any field. And when that disruption happens, there's obviously opposition and contention, conflict. But if you get past the contention and conflict stage, then there is merging of concerns. And you can see that as an example when you think about communication before the time of the internet, people used to write letters, right, and then post it. Post office was at the forefront of making sure people can communicate with each other within a country, and also between countries. People were living in different countries. And then before the digital age came about, we relied on TV or like a video store to go and find things that you want to watch and things like that. And then there comes disruptors. In the first case, for letter writing, email was a disruptor, right? And if you see some of the videos from the 1990s of people trying to explain what email is to reporters, like, oh, is it like you just go and type and click a button and the other person gets it? It was hard to understand. And maybe there was even a sense of opposition and conflict between the traditional institution then, which was the post office, to the email providers. Like, how can you trust, et cetera, et cetera? Like, how do you make sure it's private? I mean, there's a lot of concerns, of course. But when you get beyond the conflict stage, then there's merger of concerns. I think then people understand the beauty of what this disruptor can do to progress the world in the right direction. And similarly, the second example is, yes, I mean, video stores are a thing of the past now, right? So Netflix used to be one of those companies that used to send these videos, on-demand videos, via post. And now they don't do that. Imagine them doing that right now, right? So I think you can't even imagine the past when you're in the present, once you've experienced what these disruptors can do. So I think it's similar in this world of monetary world and finance, where, yes, maybe the crypto people are saying, down with the banks, and the banks are saying, no regulation, no complete anarchy, blah, blah. So I think there is conflict going on. Actually, I think we are almost past the stage of conflict, because we know in the world around there are banks who are already offering crypto services to their customers, right? And our view at VALR is that there is place for both. And I think in the future, maybe an institution like VALR will both be providing traditional services as well as crypto services, and an institution like a bank that has been previously traditional will continue to provide their traditional services and also provide crypto services. So there will be this merger when you look beyond the conflict stage of why, oh my goodness, this disruptor is going to put me out of business, to, oh, okay, maybe, there is definitely value in this. So that's my view when it comes to our view as an institution towards other institutions in the context of crypto and its evolution. And when it comes to individuals within the company, we hold value system at a very high regard, and one of the basic requirement to be working at VALR is truthfulness, right? So I think you always speak the truth. There is no room for vacillation when it comes to the truth. So on the foundation of truth, then there are other virtues of integrity and ethics and respect and communication and working diligently, working hard to make sure that we are doing the right thing, building the right things, and communicating in the right way. And again, goes back to my point of how do we make something excellent? By having the people who are excellent and who are aligned with our value systems. So, and then I would say, like, when our users are our community, I think when we interact with our users and how we present our products to our users. And the meetups that we organize, the conferences that we go to, community, not just within our customer base, but also across different customer bases in various parts of the world. We want to be a unifying force and not a divisive force in the world. As VALR and the individuals that make up VALR, we always want to build a community that is united and reflects the value system that crypto itself has created, which is that we are all one, and we need to create a financial system that recognizes that we are all one.
Very nice. Very inspiring. Actually, I really love the image of when I was young, I would go to the video store and pick out the videos for the weekend. So of course there's some nostalgia there, but I'm also perfectly fine with just getting it from Netflix. However, nowadays I don't watch movies anymore. It seems there's so many movies now that I've gone to a point of not watching movies. So
too many. It's like
yes.
You go to a cereal aisle and then you have too many options and you don't know what to buy.
Yeah, it's a lot. But that's okay because, with so many options available to you, including crypto, by the way, there's millions of tokens now. So I just stick to Bitcoin. Just because there's so many options doesn't mean you have to do everything. It's also an opportunity to focus. So, but anyway, that's a side point on the side. Buddy, this was a wonderful podcast. We did about 70 minutes, which is great. And I think this concludes this episode. I'm very happy with this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for the thought-provoking questions that led to the conversations. Hopefully, the audience will find it useful and insightful. And thanks for the time.
Okay. Thank you very much, buddy. And bye-bye, everybody.